Just off Biloxi's coast, Deer Island pokes out of the Gulf. It's unassuming now with its long, empty beaches, but legends tell of a brutal history which includes pirate visitors, ghosts, and buried treasure. Jacob Kittilstad steps into its sands this Mystery Monday.
Fishing boats putter past Deer Island on a windy morning. If you don't mind getting some sand in your sandwich.
It's a good place to have a picnic.
Edmund Boudreau says he's been to the 40-acre Isle many times, but when he's working, he's a historian in the Biloxi area. And like others, he's read the spooky 1922 article written by A.G. Ragazine, relaying a tale by Captain Eugene Tibolet Sr.
In the late 1890s, supposedly two individuals went to camp out on the island for the evening. And when they turned around, here stood a skeleton with cutlass in hand and no head.
And the most popular explanation is a pirate curse cast centuries earlier by a brutal, unnamed ship captain.
And he took a crew, 3 or 4 guys, and they went to the island. And he basically said, "Who wants to guard the treasure?" And one unwitting pirate said, "I do." And at this point, the first mate cut his head off with a cutlass. The head was thrown into the palmetto trees. His skeleton was dumped in with the treasure to guard it.
But what you might not know is that up into the 1960s, it's true, you would not be alone on Deer Island. The reason? Well, people were actually living on it.
That's me. I was 16 years old, and I had a pet crow. I was born July the 29th, 1943, on Deer Island. We was millionaires and didn't know it back in them days because, you know, we didn't know anything else because we were born and raised over there, you know.
Ronald J. Baker spent most of the first 26 years of his life on Deer Island. Of course, he did go to school.
We had to row, and my daddy brought us in the big boat during the bad weather, you know.
He also didn't miss out on many of life's luxuries.
The house was plumb wired just like a house on the mainland. Always company out there. I mean, with a big family like we were, there was always somebody over there, you know.
That is, until the late 60s.
Camille, 1969 Hurricane Camille wiped the slate clean. There was nothing left. 4 houses gone.
And that's the only reason the family left. No hauntings, no ghosts.
Heard that somebody had said long years ago a strange ship sailed under the east end of Deer Island and they saw a little boat go ashore. And I don't know if that's, you know.
I'm not a believer in these ghost stories. Don't get me wrong, I believe that there are spirits in the world, but not spirits like in the sense of haunts and ghosts as we speak of today. There were pirates in the Gulf. Of course, the legend, it has a lot of a foundation of a good prank.
In Harrison County, Jacob Kittilstad, WJTV News Channel 12.
All right, as always, thank you, Jacob. Now let's head over to TJ to see what's happening in sports. Welcome back. The USS Cairo is the last surviving city-class gunboat in the world. It's a fact, perhaps surprising, since the ship has already sunk once. Jacob Kittilstad dives into the story this Mystery Monday.
I felt the borders, but I didn't know what they were.
The project was never what you'd call touch and go. It was more people telling a young Ken Parks, go and touch.
It was certainly dark water, I know that. We used to kid the people about having eyeballs in my fingers.
Parks, now 88 years old, stands on the deck of the ship he helped raise, the USS Cairo, a Union vessel operating in Western waters. Now it's docked on dry land at Vicksburg National Military Park.
Every item that you see here in the museum was retrieved from the USS Cairo. It is the first United States Navy vessel that is sunk by an electrically detonated mine, or torpedo, as it were called in the mid-19th century. Really something that you and I would refer to as an IED, an improvised explosive device.
It was near here on the Yazoo River that ironclad gunboat went down. It sank on December 12, 1862. 6 people were injured, but no one lost their lives. What was lost, however, was the ship. For years, people thought that it was in one location, instead being in another, and that was proven 93 years after its sinking.
And Warren just happened to be observing a magnetic compass, and when they passed over the Cairo, the needle deflected the 180 degrees, so they knew they had something significant.
4 years later, scuba divers Ken Parks and Skeeter Hart groped their way through muddy water in search of the precious artifacts impacted in the debris.
Oh, all kinds of bottles and guns and rifles and stuff like that. The barrel, this is the first gun we raised.
Mr. Park says he worked through the 50s and early 60s, basically getting that job because he was a willing volunteer diver.
This much was sticking out of the mud right here. This was a hobby. We weren't qualified divers to do anything, really.
Eventually, the group making the discovery, including Ed Bars of the military park and Warren Grabeau of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, well, they convinced the Warren County Board of Supervisors to fund the ship's retrieval. The amount given? A cool 40 grand.
You can see the tin plate that they would have had. Sailor perhaps maybe didn't know how to write, so he carved a star on the bottom of his plate.
Park guides say the investment was well worth the reward. Living history that's tangible, real, you can even walk on it.
It's something that you can touch, you can see, and you can feel.
But Ken Park says he doesn't know how he feels about the ship. He hasn't visited this place in decades, and although he hasn't forgot about his treasure hunting days, he says they're long behind him.
Back in those days, well, you had a metal detector, you get mini balls and everything else in the ground, but not anymore.
Exploring the unexplained in Warren County, Jacob Kittilstad, WJTV News Channel 12.
Fascinating, and Mr. Parks, you are something else. Researchers say there could be as many as 4 more Civil War era wrecks on the Yazoo River, but the Cairo was believed to be the most complete. Train engineers, they see a lot on the rails, rolling through dark towns in the dead of night, and nothing will make them hit the brakes faster than when they spot a person on the tracks. But in Copiah County, a number of trains have slowed after experiencing ghostly sightings. Jacob Kittilstad reports.
Reducing speed along this curve, a Canadian national train enters the village of Beauregard. Those tracks lie about 150 yards from Anita Clyburn's back door.
Freight trains every few hours, the Amtrak twice a day. It becomes a part of life. I think for people who haven't ever lived on a railroad tracks, you notice it a lot. Maybe it's very similar to you live in New York and you live on a busy road and you start to tune it out.
Anita says she started hearing the click-clack of the trains when she moved here as a teenager, and she quickly learned about the spirit-like sightings near the place known as Flagstaff and the connected death of Dr. Elias Rowan in 1912.
He was the town doctor for Wesson, and he would simply walk across either my property or Brother Greer's property to get to the railroad tracks because it was the shortest way to town. He would walk down the tracks when he had a patient to see. My understanding is that he was older and it was at night, and he may have been going to see a patient, but maybe he got confused, thought he was walking on the track that there wouldn't be a train on, but he was run over by the train.
Then, in the 1920s, engineers started seeing a floating, swinging lantern coming to Beauregard after leaving or going toward Macomb.
And what people might not realize is the sheer number of trains that was passing through this area of the state during that time.
We had the old Panama Limited, the City of New Orleans, number 3, number 4, number 8, and number 2.
Bob Bellapani works at the Macomb City Railroad Depot Museum.
And basically this was their washout or collapsible basement. You just pull it down.
He says during that era, trains were large, even passenger trains like this.
But I tell you, it's a monster. You know, you don't want one of these wheels falling on you. And they would stop at every place there was anything that resembled a stop. We had some characters that worked on our trains. Some of them love to tell a good story, and probably a lot of the good stories that they would tell weren't necessarily so. But there were some odd things that happened on the railroad. There really was.
The Illinois Central Rail Line received multiple reports of that lantern, the story goes. The cases would be closed, with the source of the light left unidentified.
And even when my parents lived here, we would hear the train slamming on brakes and stopping back on the tracks behind the house. And we didn't know if that was an animal or they saw a lantern, but it's an interesting story.
Exploring the unexplained in Copiah County, Jacob Kittilstad, WJTV News Channel 12.
This story was also featured in the book Ghost Stories of Mississippi, which was so popular that children took field trips to that part of the tracks through the 1960s and 70s.